Hi, everybody. Tina Brock, Producing Artistic Director here at the Idiopathic Ridiculopathy Consortium in Philadelphia. I'm your host for Into the Absurd, a virtually existential dinner conversation. I do hope you'll join us the next 50 minutes. Sit back and relax as we explore the lives, the hearts, the minds, and the spirits of creators in Philadelphia region and around the world. Thanks for joining us here on Into the Absurd. I am your host, Tina Brock. I am the Producing Artistic Director here at the Idiopathic Ridiculopathy Consortium in Philadelphia, and so delighted that you've taken a little bit of time out of your weekend to be a part of Into the Absurd. We have so enjoyed being here with you every week, and on today's show, we're going to delve, we're going to dive. That was a combination of dive and delve. We're going to invent new words today. We're going to talk to Mark Williams, and Mark has a long history with the IRC, and we're going to talk to him about his graduate studies at the University of Maryland in media and projections and his journey along the way. And we invite you to join in on the conversation by putting your questions in the chat. If you're joining us on Facebook Live tonight, welcome to you. Thanks for taking time out to be with us, and to our friends around the country and around the world. It is so much a delight to be with you here, and we enjoy having you as we explore the existential quandaries and questions on Into the Absurd. Mark Williams. Mark is an old friend and such a big part of the Idiopathic Ridiculopathy Consortium's trajectory. I got to know Mark. We all got to know Mark, Bob Schmidt, and Eric and I back when Mark was a student at Rowan University, and he helped us in all manner and form during many productions here at the IRC. He worked in the tech booth up at Studio 5 at the Walnut. He was a man of all seasons, and he just pitched in. And his can-do attitude, his intelligence, and just his extraordinary ability to solve problems and put his mind to work was of great use in many shows here at the IRC. He went on to work in props and properties for the Walnut Street Theater, for Philadelphia Theater Company, for the Delaware Theater Company, and of course for the IRC. And he designed many very important props for the IRC, including a very special one for Betty's Summer Vacation, many for Exit the King, and he has really contributed to what you see on stage, the scenic design and the properties design, which is such an important part. He went on to the graduate studies program at the University of Maryland, and that's where we find him today in the media and projections department. And we're going to talk to him about a very important project, very successful project that he just completed working on. So with all that in mind, Mark Williams, welcome to Into the Absurd.
Hello, Tina.
Hello.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so delighted to have you on, Mark. This is one of the, I want to say, maybe the second or third conversation we've had about set design. You know, Anna Corrali, she was on with us earlier, designed a number of shows for the IRC, but I was so interested in I guess we got together because you were doing your portfolio.
Yep, my portfolio review this spring. And of course, the University of Maryland is my alma mater. So I have a feeling for that, a very strong feeling for that school. And we got into talking about media and projection and how that is changing live theater, how it's changing virtual theater. And so that is the conversation that I wanted to sort of explode today on Into the Absurd. Yeah.
I'd love to find out from you when you graduated from Rowan as a theater major. Do you remember
that was 2016, actually. And
2016?
After 2016, then I went straight into the apprenticeship program at the Walnut Street Theater and became a props apprentice there. Yeah.
Did you, when you were in school at Rowan or when you got out, did you have a sense of where you wanted to be? How did you make that decision that properties is where you wanted to find yourself?
My journey at Rowan was interesting because I was actually primarily doing stage management stuff at Rowan, and props was more of a side thing. And while at Rowan, I also started to explore projections. My senior project at Rowan, which is kind of like our thesis for the semester, was actually focused on projections. And I did two pieces that were just one of them revolved around the use of camera in the space and reasserting the stage image onto the stage. And the other one was a shadow puppet piece with a one-woman show, and then there was interactive, creepy shadow puppets that were projected around her. So I've always had this interest in projections. I went into props because that was where my primary focus was at Rowan and what became my primary focus. But now in 2020, I'm here in the graduate program at UMD for projections and media. I'm studying under Jared Mezzocchi, who's become a little bit of a big name in, how should I say, pandemic theater. So.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear. I want to hear all about the show that you've been working on and hear about him. And he's your mentor at University of Maryland. Is that true?
Leads the cohort, the projections and media design program.
Yeah, that's. I want to ask you, Mark. I know as a director, as a director, properties for me are so properties being anything. I guess you can define that for us, but I see it as a director as anything that is handled or is integral to telling the story, that is, that needs to be constructed and or found and or sourced to lend authenticity, to lend verisimilitude to the situation. I guess that's a little bit of a broad subject when you're talking about absurd theater, because as you well have found out designing for us. But what is it about finding
props,
the specific pieces of life that you populate the stage with that help the actors?
I've gotten better at answering that question, coincidentally, from being in the design program here at UMD. And before that, I would normally answer that question with a labor answer, which is properties is the set dressings and all handled objects while on stage. And that's the labor answer. That's the union answer. So, but I think I've come up with a better answer, which I've discovered through trying to be empathetic and think about the people that are on stage, the characters of the play. And that's really what property is about. It's very similar into costumes in that props mean something to the person on stage. It was chosen by a person on stage. Where he's like, set is like, this is how they built houses. This is how the architecture of the space, or this is how we're going to creatively engage in some kind of sculpture that suits the mood and the idea of the play. With props, things are very related to the person. It's, I'm looking for an object on my desk, but it's actually a little messy right now. But
I got one for you, Mark, here, like a teacup. Like my teacup. Right. That's super important, right?
Like, first thing I grab on my desk, a lens pen. What is this used for? It's used for cleaning lenses and optical equipment. But that tells you something about me. That is that I handle optical equipment and that I have cameras and stuff like that. And that's, I think, where props really connects to your play, is that you have to start thinking about who's on stage, what's the person's story, why do they have this, where did they get it from, how far back does it go? And that's seems like a lot to just put a teacup on stage. And sometimes it is like they went to IKEA and they bought a teacup. They're the kind of person who shops at IKEA. But that is also a personality trait of them. Where do they shop? Why do they shop there?
Do you have actors? I know in our time together when we worked on shows at the IRC, I've often will work in conjunction, or I'll say to you, or just do it and then say, Marcus, it's okay. In total Tina Brog, is like, could I have I'd like to use this teacup because it has special meaning to me as an actor. Do you find often that actors will ask you to bring something they own as that object that they can use, or will a director come to you and ask to,
That's some usually answered by budget. So sometimes, especially in smaller black box theater, absolutely, people will have like, I just know this works for the character, or I feel this works for my character, or I connect with this, or they just have something that works. Usually at companies like DTC or the Walnut, maybe the character or the actor will talk about that, and then we'll go out and get that for them. I have had like a few instances where I've actually put like personal objects on stage because it's just like, I know this is what should be used on stage. Even it was a production that had like a $7,000 props budget, and still I took one of my old film SLR cameras, and I was like, because the actress on stage was having trouble with the bulky one that I gave her, and I was like, this is a nice compact film SLR, and immediately she took to it because everything was just very intuitive. It was very small and very good for the stage. So Yeah, personal objects like that do sometimes end up on stage, and things that we have connections to. Usually I try to just get one for the production, just so there's no risk of hurting people's own personal belongings. But yeah.
Do you ever watch in the same way a costume designer would look and say, might think, that costume isn't really, the actor hasn't really absorbed that costume, or that costume is not actually right for that character? Do you ever observe where you just haven't selected the right prop? Does it get that specific for you, where you feel like, I mean, you just gave an example, but have you?
Yeah, I think there are situations where it's just like, he has a guitar on stage, and it's just like, that's not the right guitar, that's not the right object for that person. And it can come down to period, it can come down to the economic class of that person, and just, or how clean they are. Like, you wouldn't have a person who's very messy wouldn't have like perfectly clean objects, or if things might be dusty. You really just got to get into the living space and the headspace of the person who owns the object or handles the object, and figure out what actually that tells you everything you need to know about it. And plenty of times I put something on stage and it's just not right. Like, or I just put something on stage and they're like, this feels weird. And I'm like, it's a do for now prop. And we just need to get the right thing for the character. And it does function in the same way that the right object will help inform the action. As in, the right costume will informs posture and how one carries themselves on stage, which is why it's so often that the doofer needs to be right. And sometimes we'll see rehearsal costumes that just have the structure and the feel of what the actual performance costume is going to be. The same holds true for props.
What's the most unusual prop that you've ever had to create or source?
Unusual? I think you know the answer to that.
I was just going to say, I think it might be. I think it might be Betty's Summer Vacation. But like, for those who didn't see the show, if you saw the show, you know what we're talking about. It was the surprise in the refrigerator. And if not, what's your second favorite prop that you've ever? Well, I don't know. I guess we can talk about. Well, no, let's not talk about it. Let's go to the second favorite prop.
My favorite prop, which is probably not the most unusual, was we did, what was it, Honk at Delaware Theater Company. And in Honk, in the very beginning of the show, the song "It's the Joy of Motherhood," we essentially have all these baby ducks hatching on stage. And the way we did it is, in most productions, it's just these little wood cutouts, and then like they pop the top off of the wood cutout and reveal that they were hiding behind it. In this, we actually put them in giant eggs made out of foam, in the same way that I make puppets. These were actually essentially giant puppets. I patterned them. I put children inside them, and they sat on stage for about 5 or 10 minutes inside these eggs, until finally we hit the song, and these cute little kids start popping outside of these eggs, and then they start doing a line dance while still wearing the egg.
So it was kind of costume, and it was considered
it was a little bit of both.
And set.
Yeah, it was just one of those beautiful moments where it's like something works so well, and it makes its way into being incredibly influential into the choreography, into the acting, and just into the entire pace of the show, because those eggs get to be introduced like just from the get-go, and then we see the joyous moment happen. So
that must have been a great feeling.
Oh, I love that. That is still one of my favorites.
To see that. Yeah. So you're finding these moments. You're working for very large theater companies here in Philadelphia and in Delaware. And what was the thing that made you decide you wanted to head back to graduate school, to leave, or to take that next step beyond?
Yeah,
properties?
I think I was interested in getting back into a more creative aspect of theater. Now, I say that, and as I talk about props, I've been talking about how one can be creative with them. But oftentimes when you're in props, it's a little bit of a struggle of labor and just trying to, it's very service oriented. Props can be at times because people want what they want to have it on stage, and they don't necessarily ever care about your expertise or opinion. There's been many times, and now I'm getting to the darker side of design and theater sometimes, but there's been many times when it's just like I walk into a room and like I have my research ready to go, and I'll be incredibly informed on what's going on in the period. I'll have like diagrams of like, this is what these the styles of this period look like. This is the indicators of what we should be looking for in our furniture. And then someone will say like, oh, I thought this piece I saw at Target would really work in the show. And I'm just like, sometimes because props is often at the bottom of the totem pole, your opinion isn't valued whether or not you have expertise. I've encountered plenty of people who've appreciated those expertise. And some people who they just want me to perform labor. So
sure, they have a concept and it's very solid and they see something and that just fits right into it. I for one, Mark, will never forget I think it was hundreds of cigarette butts that you created for Exit the King, that we littered the runway with, the red carpet runway that Rob Hutter had to come down. And you created those out of, it seemed like a very painstaking process. Was it wax? And then you cut them and then...
It was actually glue sticks. Funny enough.
Is that what it was?
So
and then
it was glue sticks wrapped in sheets of thermoplastic. So, and then just individually painted with the lips and for the lips, I think I just finger painted. I got my lipstick, I got my fingers wet, and then I just on the end of each cigarette. And the reason they were made out of thermoplastic and glue sticks and we just didn't use fake ones because we had to do however many shows and we didn't want to be replenishing and sweeping this up every night. So we just scattered a bunch of plastic cigarette butts all over the stage.
Hundreds. And it certainly, it was very, for a small theater company and for a large theater company, I think those kind of details are really so special for a director and for an audience to be able to see how far and how specific that the detail. I mean, it's all about the detail. The devil is in the details. So Mark, tell us about, so you're at University of Maryland as a graduate student, you're in projections and media, and you become involved in a project for the Geffen Playhouse called Someone Else's House.
Yeah.
Right. Tell us about the concept for the show, what the show is.
So Someone Else's House, it started off with mostly just trying to think of where do I begin from this. When I started off at the University of Maryland, COVID had just hit. I had actually already applied to the program and was waiting on my answer when COVID started to develop. So during that time period, people, and particularly media artists, had to move into what I've been calling pandemic theater, which is this unique situation where the media artists and the projections artists are actually primarily in control of what the production is, because everything is filtered out through a stream or through the Zoom feed, things like that. My mentor here, Jared Mezzocchi, did a very popular piece called Russian Troll Farm, and he wanted to do another media piece, this time in a Zoom feed. It started off with this idea of a ghost story that existed in his family. He pitched the idea to Geffen Playhouse, which is a theater all the way out in LA, which was doing something called the Stayhouse series, which is their own pandemic theater where they've been just having these Zoom shows. I really should stop calling it pandemic theater because virtual theater in itself has evolved past that, and I think it's here to stay. But it became was he wrote a script based off of the family story of a haunted house that they lived in. It went through revisions, it went through retellings, and it became this ghost story that we sit down in a Zoom feed, and Jared tells you the ghost story of his family, and as the story unfolds, we start to experience some of the haunting ourselves in the house. And it happens over Zoom. So it's not just something like a video where we see, these people are like a video in the sense that it can't be strongly distinguished from a short film. Jared talks to the audience. He recognizes what people are doing. As the show goes on, he might make a reference that is just ad lib about what their expression is or what how they're reacting to something.
So he can see the audience. Jared can see the audience as well. So, okay.
Not entirely through the show, but specific parts of the show, we have the Zoom feed set up for him to talk to the audience. But yeah, it grew into that. And the idea being that we would be sitting around the Zoom campfire telling this ghost story, and then the ghost would jump out of the woods at us. So it was very heavily influenced by the Blair Witch Project and the kind of feeling, especially the end of that, like this idea of talking about this haunting that occurred and informing everyone of the details, interviewing people. We have recordings of his family, and he's showing the evidence throughout the story, and then it all explodes.
And what was your role?
My role in that show was the video designer. So essentially what I did was I helped determine camera positions, the equipment necessary in order to accomplish those camera positions, the moves, the framing of that, as well as handling some of the inserted video and just making sure that equipment and those solutions were available and necessary. We make it look like he's carrying around either like a laptop or a cell phone, but what actually Jared is carrying around is an entire camera rig with a wireless webcam, a off-camera battery, his cell phone actually with the Zoom feed so he can monitor what's happening on the Zoom feed, and a microphone pack. So he's actually carrying around this rig. It looks like he's carrying around his laptop, but we needed all those pieces. We need power for a wireless webcam. We needed extra power for his phone. We needed extra power for the wireless microphone. So
is he actually controlling it, or is he carrying it because we need to be where he is?
We need to be where he is because he moves through the house.
So you're controlling it, or someone else is controlling what we see? I mean, he's controlling it in that we're seeing it through him because he's carrying the camera, but you're technically driving.
Yeah. What he's controlling is the camera feed, so he's essentially the cinematographer for us in that house. What's also being controlled is there's actually a stage manager out in LA. So this is probably one of the greatest distances between a stage manager and the actual show production, because the show was performed in Maryland. Meanwhile, the stage manager is out there in LA. The stage manager cued the show, which set up recordings and other technology and other digital insertions into the show, as well as certain glitches, video glitches that helped reaffirm the haunting. And then Jared did all the cinematography in the house. And there was a crew person inside the house that helped trigger certain physical effects, like doors creaking open, rooms changing, and lights changing as the haunting occurred. And I actually did the run crew for this show a few times, where it's essentially what I'm doing is I'm running around the house dodging the camera because I can't be seen on camera because that gives away the illusion, breaks the fourth wall, so to speak. And I'm like removing camera equipment, I'm removing tripod setups, I'm changing out projectors and stuff like that. I'm rearranging things, hiding equipment, so that Jared can move around the house and then show different parts of the house without, revealing the tricks, so to speak.
Is the show, Jared's telling the story and then you all are illustrating what happened in the story, or is it illustrating what happened right now? I mean, is it happening?
Through video and the insertions, we are doing a few different things. We're like providing the evidence as one would provide. So I handled a lot of the recordings for phone conversations that Jared had with his mom, because there's like this archive throughout the show of Jared pooling information from his mom. And we have a picture of her in the captioning, and these videos are inserted throughout the show, and he basically opens them by saying, like, I asked my mom about this and here's what she had to say. Piece of evidence. Then we'll like go on Google Maps and click through and show the graveyard that's across the street. And we'll get these pictures of the old house, or these old deeds, or these old records of the house that go all the way back to the 19th century, as well as the old family photos, and we'll insert those into the feed. Essentially, it doesn't sound like projections, but projections half the time is just taking these very same assets and running them through a projector. Now we're running them through your Zoom feed, and we're running them through a live stream, which is why media and projections people were in a fortunate position for the pandemic, and oftentimes had to take charge in these scenarios for virtual and pandemic theater, because we already had the skills developed. We already had the tools set with us that it took to make these kinds of productions.
Was this a more complicated production than Russian Troll Farm? Did it evolve in that way? And is that one of the reasons why?
I can't speak to the complications of Russian Troll Farm too much, because I wasn't on that production specifically. It was a different one, because this one had the audience's presence in the room. There was this sense of, and the reason we did that is because we wanted to inspire this sense of aliveness. When we're in these virtual spaces and we're watching virtual theater, sometimes it can feel a little bit like a movie, and we have to ask ourselves what distinguishes virtual theater from television and film. I think one of the best ways to answer that is by interacting with the audience. And I think there's other answers too that haven't been fully explored. One idea that was thrown around for this show actually was taking the Zoom feed and projecting it in the space. That was a very early draft of the show. But that is a way that, because in doing something like that, the audience sees themselves in the presence of this show. See, when we're in the theater, we can look around, we see other people, we see the people on stage. There's a mutual awareness of each other. When we're doing certain kinds of virtual theater, that mutual awareness may not be as present as we'd like it to be. And that's why this format was chosen with the Zoom feed and talking to people in the Zoom, because it optimizes that liveness.
The Someone Else's House was very, very favorably reviewed in the New York Times. What do you feel is in large part due to the popularity? What do you think drove that? There's sort of the review of it, but then there's the audience review of it, which you said was quite successful and sold out.
I think there's we've been interacting with each other a lot through Zoom, through social media lately, especially during the pandemic. And because of that, we're acclimated to these kinds of environments, and perhaps we're craving for something exciting to happen in these environments, So, and that in that way, Someone Else's House fulfills that need. I think also relating to the idea of just death in general, because that's been a topic that's been all around us throughout the pandemic, the risk, the deadliness of it. And a lot of what's talked about in Someone Else's House is a ghost story of these people, the past, and these people are haunting us. And while that is a little bit indirect, it's still just at our heart right now, where we're stuck in a house and the idea of death is all around us. So Yeah, I think those are two things that really led to its reception, and that desperate want for liveness in the theater space and to do something, bring liveness to the Zoom space.
Do you think that the virtual space does offer sort of an intimacy, if you will, that is harder, that is, I guess, more personal than one that you might experience in the theater?
More personal. That's difficult. I think sometimes yes, because especially in those larger houses, like one thing I think many of us love about black box theater is that it's so personal and intimate. We can really connect with the audience, and the audience can connect with us. I think Zoom does that better than any giant house. Any 1,500 seat house or 1,000 seat house. I feel like if you can connect to the people on a Zoom feed or in a virtual space, you're going to do that more. That's going to be more successful for that connection than in a massive Broadway house. Regarding the comparison to the black box theater, I think they're equal in some regards. In the Zoom space, there's something we're lacking, which is we cannot look to the left and look to the right and see the other bystanders among us.
The audience, like as an audience member, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things that was so shocking about this show and the ending, and what had many people really scared at the end of this show, was because they were just sitting there watching a show on their laptop, and everything was going down and everything was going wrong, and there was real danger in front of them. And all they had to, the only other person who was next to them was like their husband or wife or their a few family members, because some people like to watch it as a group. They like to sit on their couch and sit in front of their laptop. And that bystander effect is lost in the Zoom world, because now it's just a small group and you're watching this man get the crap scared out of him because he's experiencing this horrible haunting, and you're just watching the train wreck in front of you on your laptop. So,
and do you think that just engendered a sense of helplessness for people, that they wanted to do something, but they didn't know was the chat used as a function in that? Was there any way they could communicate with you?
So yeah, some people did use the chat. At the end of the show, some people refused to get off the Zoom feed, or had to be told to get off the Zoom feed, because they thought Jared was in actual danger. They thought he was actually hurt or actually injured. And they're like, is someone going to check on him? Is he okay? Like, what happened? And because they were helpless. They were just watching the train wreck.
How did you handle that? Did someone come on, or?
Yeah, there was a house management through Geffen Playhouse, and they did an excellent job. The show actually ends. They sort of end the show, so to speak, because the show essentially cuts out at the end.
Right. Yeah.
And what happens is they're like, I guess Jared's not with us anymore. So, and then they give like the ending speech of like, thanks for coming to Geffen Playhouse. See you all later. And everyone's like on the Zoom feed still like, is he okay? Should someone call the police? Like, is someone checking on him? And yeah, it was interesting. Funny enough, one night his mom came to see the show. Jared's mom came to see the show, and at the end of the show, she was like, I'm sure he's fine."
They know how the story goes. And Jared was in the house that he grew up in, that this unfolded in, or was this a different house?
I don't reveal.
Okay, all right. We don't want to get into too specifics of it. Okay. And yes. Can I ask, was the show different every night?
It was a little bit different every night, because he did interact with different people, and it definitely grew as time passed. I remember how it looked on opening night, and then I came back because they needed someone to fill in the crew, and I was like, wow, this show is taking a lot of different beats, a lot of different turns, And also, like, I think the most different night was when he had to perform it for his mom, because now it was one of the people who were central to the storyline was just like, you can't do that the same way that you do every other show, and like having his mom in the audience. So, yeah.
What for you as an artist and as a working in media and projections now are the things that excite you about a world where virtual theater will exist? What do you feel it can do really well? Does it have to do with that size of the house that you just talked about, where you can create this intimacy that normally we might only see in a small theater? Is it that? Is there some aspect of the fact that y'all are really driving the bus? I know with this show, Eric and Bob are all like, they're making the show happen, really, unlike on a traditional theater where the actors have to fix it, if whatever happens.
Yeah. And honestly, in live theater, we got to fix things that just happen too.
Right. I mean, that's not entirely
in live
fair.
Virtual theater, yeah. Like the mistakes do happen. I think on the production of Russian Troll Farm, there was one night where the stream crashed and everyone had to get back into the stream.
Yeah.
I think the primary benefit of virtual theater is bringing the sense of live theater directly into the intimate space of your home. That increases accessibility, that reaches audiences that you'll never reach. We had people. So the Stayhouse series is produced by Geffen Playhouse, which is out in LA. We had people all across the country logging in to see the show. We had people from Canada, from Europe, from Singapore. We think we had one guy from Japan, because we saw Japanese signage behind him. So it's just like, these are audiences we would never reach before. Also, accessibility for people who can't always get out of their house, the elderly, certain people with certain disabilities. Those people may not be able to experience live theater, or to experience it is a significant challenge. And virtual theater allows us to bring that directly to their home in the same way that television revolutionized the way we stare at a screen and watch a story unfold in front of us, because now we were getting it right in our homes. Why would we go to the theaters in the 20th century when we could have a television in our home? It was supposed to kill the movie theater. It didn't. I don't think virtual theater was ever meant to kill theater, but now we have another way to work, express ourselves, and engage in our art.
Well, that's certainly true of this show. We are, obviously we've reached more people since this has been happening in June a year ago, than we could be doing theater for the rest of our lives. And at a 60 seat house or whatever, around that number of seats, it would take a long time. Now it's a very different thing we're doing, but the idea is that people get to know that there's a company in Philadelphia that's working in existentialism, and there's a company that's working in absurdism, and that, and so it's a freedom, if you will, Mark, like you say, and it also allows us to connect with people that, for whatever reason, choice, or that they wouldn't get out to the theater or be able to meet us otherwise.
Distance is oftentimes the biggest barrier.
Yeah. How do you think theaters will, or how do you envision that the virtual space will move forward? Would you imagine that it would be projects like the ones you've been working on, where it's a story around the campfire, to pull that beautiful image, and that we work with the projections and media the way you're talking about in someone else's house? Do you think that, or do you think it will be filmed productions that everyone will be taping their shows and running them that way, or a combination of both?
I think it will be a little bit of everything. I think now that the floodgates are open to the possibilities, theaters are going to engage in this kind of media how we see fit. It's what I think is most interesting about this is what we've been forced to do as theater artists is expand into the web, expand into virtual meeting space, the internet spaces, the Skype spaces, and the live streaming spaces. So I think we're going to see plenty of companies still doing live streams. I am hoping that we see more of these kind of video conferencing space style shows where someone's in the Zoom feed with you and they're putting on a performance with you, because that has a certain sense of intimacy and liveness that can't be matched. I hope that we also take our live in-person performances, although even this is in person because we are people, we are here and we're in here. But I hope we take our in-theater performances. I hope we find better ways to make them accessible through the use of cameras, filming, and perhaps even involve these virtual spaces in this in-person, in-theater space more so. I think I've been playing with a few ideas in my head about how we can make some sort of hybrid production where the Zoom space is just as involved in what's happening on stage as the people who are actually sitting in the theater space. And that's two different ways to experience the production, and they're both equally legitimate. Yeah, I think it's here to stay. I think so. And I hope that writers and producers remain open to the idea. I think immediately, now that we're all reopening and the season starting again, I think immediately everyone's just going to want to pick up where they left off, literally pick up the show that was canceled due to COVID and put it up. We're seeing plenty of that. That's okay. I think we're going to return back to virtual theater after we've been through like a fall and a spring of,
it's so
just
funny
doing our regular theater.
Sorry to interrupt you, Mark.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I could see that happening, is that there's something that has been gained that's very rich and very intimate and very personal about this space. And as you were talking, I was thinking, oh gosh, you could do a situation where you're at the theater and you have Into the Absurd happening, right? And Mark, you come in to see the show, but we're doing a before show. I mean, not dissimilar to a red carpet chat or whatever, but you're sort of getting a sense, even if you're not going to be able to see the show, you're getting a sense of what that show is. And maybe you're talking to the actors, and maybe you're talking to the director as they're coming in, or maybe you're giving people a backstage tour. Yeah, as the shows. That's a very fundamental way of using it, and not in the same way that you were speaking of. But for a small theater, it really does expand that concept of the post-show discussion that we all, it brings us closer to our audience, and we get to talk about the things that happen in the show. But the practicalities of it sometimes just aren't there if you're a small company and you've got a cast of 10 or 20 or more, and they need to get home, or sometimes it just doesn't really work itself out. But if you integrate it in a different way, because I know we're talking about using this show as a way of when we are back live, of doing the backstage tour, of really talking to people, and it makes it possible that you don't have to be I don't have to be in a broadcast channel to do that.
Yeah, totally.
So it really levels things out, and then you get very fancy with it the way you're talking about, and you can bring all kinds of, we're talking about, you and I were in a meeting the other night about an adaptation that David Robson, playwright in Wilmington, Philadelphia area, has written of Strindberg's The Stronger, and his wife Sonia Robson. And I we're picking your brain and using all of your skill and understanding as a way to add that as an event to our schedule.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, as you said, we've learned so many new tricks from the virtual space, and so many things that we can use to leverage ourselves as artists and theater companies that advantages us even greater than we were before. We're coming out of this pandemic a lot stronger, I think, because of what we learned. And to go on with that idea of adaptation, you think about what were the first films. Oftentimes they were adaptations of written novels and stuff like that, and even to this day we often write novels or before adapting them to film or TV. I think as we move forward and as virtual theater becomes more popular and more prevalent, we're going to see work that is specifically made and adapted for these spaces, that are so that they can be staged in these virtual spaces. That's what someone else's house was. A few of my colleagues and acquaintances with Jared, we talked about, because he did I think 67 performances of this show. He performed it over 60 times. And wow. Yeah, there was a discussion at one point where it's like, are we going to find someone to play Jared Mezzocchi because he's playing himself? Like, are we going to find a professional actor to play Jared Mezzocchi because the show is in demand, it's extended. There's talks of putting it up again one more time, and a series, just preliminary talks. But once you replace Jared Mezzocchi with a professional actor and you have this script, now this is something that we sell to someone else, another company, and they reproduce this show as you do with Tennessee Williams, like reproducing this show and reproducing this script. That's something that we kind of realized at one point, is like, but we had never considered. And that's how new work is born. That's how these new spaces are born. Like, these scripts have to, I hope one day that someone else's house gets reproduced somewhere. That would be amazing. It would be revolutionary.
Do you think the show, I mean, it obviously would be different if someone came in and replaced it, but in your observation, how much of the just the very fabric of this storytelling and this show and Jared's life and his family is I mean, I guess you could say that of any
integral.
Show that is integral. I mean, you could say that of anybody who originates a role and we just identify, them with that role forever, but someone else takes it on and they put their spin on it. But it sounds like this is in his bones, literally.
I think there's plenty of solo pieces like that where it is all about the person who originally wrote it, or the character it's about, or whatever autobiography it is. And that's one of the terrible things we sometimes do as theater artists. We take someone else's story, we relate to it, and then we run with it in a completely different direction.
Yeah, right.
Sometimes it's great. Sometimes it tramples on the story.
Yeah.
Wow, we tried.
Yeah.
Or we did.
It's an evolution, right?
Yeah, it's always an evolution.
There's a question here, Mark. Can you speak to the ever greater use of projections in live theater before the pandemic and now also going forward, and what that can answer to, what that can add to a piece? And I have a follow-up question to that.
Yeah. Projections can do a lot of different things. Projections are just getting used more because the technology is cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. Like, you can buy a pretty decent projector for like $100 these days. It's just everywhere. It's within the hands of avant-garde theater and every kind of artist. And the technology has gotten easier to use. We have QLab to thank for that, although you have to be using a Mac and it's still expensive, and that locks out a lot of younger people from that. I'm currently studying mostly with Isadora. There's tons of other software out there now. Why can't I think of it? Disguise, which I think is called something else now. Not something else now. They named it something other than Disguise. So people are going to Google search something else now. So that's one of the reasons accessibility has increased for projection design software, just projections in general. More software, cheaper equipment. You can put the stuff everywhere, and higher lumen outputs are possible. You don't have to. There was a day and age when you had to stack like 4 projectors together in order to get a bright image. We still do that occasionally. In fact, I did that for a disco project I did in the spring. We stacked 2 high-power projectors because we had to compete with streetlights. But now you can just buy a projector, you can throw it in your black box, and it's ready to go. It's ready to project. I think playwrights are starting to think about how that can be used more often. I think we're getting more contemporary stories. Projections look really weird if you're in Victorian England and Sherlock Holmes is running around. You just yes, you can, but it's whenever someone sees a projection on stage, they're usually keenly aware that they're looking at a projection. It's you can hide it. It can be used for effects with quite well, but it's a tough question because there's just so many different ways that projections can be used. You can wash the stage. You can put something up on a specific wall. You can show someone dreaming. You can be inside the head of the person on stage, and just that's what I did for a project I did at Rowan, where this young woman would tell the audience of her nightmares, these premonitions she'd have about disasters, and how they would just attack her mind. And we'd be in her head thinking about all these normal things, or like thinking about these superhero cartoons that she'd watch as a young girl, and then just these horrible images of tragedy would strike during these dreams, and they were in a very jarring way, and that's the point, because it's incredibly jarring for her. Shadow puppetry too.
I'm just thinking, as you're speaking about it, Mark, that it feels to me like the work of Eugenie and Ezio, which is very surreal and has this incredible lightness of being to it. Sometimes there's a play where, in one of his plays, where very difficult for a small theater company to solve this design challenge, where you need this large, it's about a regret, and it's called Amédée, or How to Get Rid of It. And you have this husband and wife, and they haven't left their apartment in years. And there's a side story that's very integral, which is about a child that is deceased, but it's about regret and how regret grows. And there's a body that continues to just sort of grow and grow, and it pushes through walls, and then it floats down the Seine. And it's, and I've loved this play and I love what it represents, but it has provided some food for thought along the years, and trying to figure out how to, and not that projections haven't been around, because they have, but what you're saying about it being more accessible now, I think that it really, this world of imagination, and the world particularly that Eugenie and Ezio inhabits a lot, where you have just people in these very surreal, those are themes and tones that he just is in all the time.
That's I told you I was reading The Killer. That's one of the reasons I was looking at that play, because there's just and that's a signature of his, that magical moment that's always in the play or at the end of the play. That's funny that everything you were just describing is like, are we talking about COVID again? Because that's what it felt like.
Well, for all those years, when 16 years ago when we started the IRC, and fairly enough, people would say is existential, is absurd, a place we really want to live? Is that what we really go to the theater for? And, I've always felt that the big questions are the ones that are interesting, and they certainly were to us, which is why the company was formed. And I think with the pandemic, it put a whole new sort of focus for me, and in thinking about the shows that we'll be looking at as we, we re-enter. I'm super excited to hear all that you're talking about in terms of projections, because I think for a small company that has a limited budget, doing something like what we did with Charles Mee's Paradise Park, when Anna Corelli did the projections for that show, that was a really large. That show looked so different than anything else we'd done. We had to be in 20 different places. Charles Mee just beautifully takes you to this all took place in one amusement park.
Yeah.
But we had to really, in designing that set, Anna had to really get her head around that. So in little Studio 5 up there at the Walnut, we were with a projector, and it was a big step, but it really opened up a lot of doors in terms of, like, as an existentialist or absurdist theater company, knowing that projections could be really used to really further the story in an exciting way. What kinds of what's on the docket for you at next semester at school? What are the kinds of classes that you'll be taking, and what will you be learning?
On my next semester docket is let's see, public projections, which is just Jared talking about. It's us. It's basically us sitting down with Jared and just trying to solve certain problems in the idea of, like, projections that are viewed out in the world, and how how projections can be used outside of the theater space, but also in other places. I'm I'm going to be doing some drawing and rendering courses. What else? I'm helping lead, not lead, but I'm helping facilitate a large equipment purchase that the Brin Institute at University of Maryland, which is this new institute for interdisciplinary performance that has been founded here at UMD. We're making this massive camera purchase so we can start utilizing cameras, because cameras and image capture is how we accomplish a lot of things in projection and media design. When you think about what a projections or media artist does, we are theater artists who take or create video and digital assets and find ways to utilize them in performance. And that's not limited to the stage. That's not limited to the virtual space. We find a way to get these assets into the space and how to enhance the performance, shape the performance, or create the performance. The things, that's why I was saying earlier, like the things that we as media artists knew about projections it's just a matter of which way I send the video, whether I send it over the Zoom feed or I send it out of a projector. It's all the same. Not all the same, but it's very similar.
But it does sound like I love your former point about writing plays that incorporate, really thinking specifically about how could we make, and it's happening, and we are watching it, but the many different ways in which that can be, those pieces can be integrated to create a new kind of experience. That seems like it would be a very exciting place for you to be thinking.
And adaptations too, like as you were thinking about as you were talking about Ionesco's plays, I was thinking about, like, could that be something that we set up a house with cameras in it, and it's in the walls, it's happening in this space, and we're trapped in this space. How do we make that different from a television show? There's ways. There's interactions that can happen. How does the audience feel like they're really, really there in that space? We should
talk about that play, Mark. That's one that's been on the list for a long time. And for so long, we were thinking about Studio 5 and its dimensions of what I'm guesstimating here, but 40 by 22 or something. And how do we, how does that body, because I think I might have talked to you about this at one point, where this sort of puppet grows larger and larger. And as the little man and the little woman who have not left their apartment in forever, they get all of their groceries up through they get them through the window, partly because of this regret that they have. As their fear grows, the regret grows, and it pushes through the walls, and then it starts to like crowd the little man and the little woman out, and then it blows out the window and goes down the Seine. And as does happen a lot in Ionesco's plays, it takes on many different shapes and colors, but it's an important part of the play, and it needs to happen. That regret floats away, and then they try to actually retrieve it, and then there's a war, of course. But I'd love to talk to you more about that.
I'll have to get my hands on that script.
Oh, it's a good one. Yeah. Mark, I can't believe it. It's 5:57.
Yeah.
How did we do that? I've so enjoyed talking with you.
There's so many interesting things to talk about in media and projections.
Oh my gosh, yes.
These days. So it's been developing fast.
Well, I'm so excited to stay in touch with you. Of course, we're going to be working on this project that just is in its first phases, but I'm really excited to see where you are headed. And where do you think you're headed? Do you know?
I'm hoping that I can go back to Philadelphia and get my feet back in there as a projections and media artist, I won't say it's my home city because I'm from New Jersey, but it is the city that my career started in. So my home city, Philadelphia. So I want to get my feet back in there. So,
well, I cannot wait to see what's in store for you, and I'll be seeing you soon. We'll be working on this project, and we're so delighted to have you. So, Mark, thank you so much for taking time to be with us and expand all of our minds about the projects you're working on and what's coming down the line. And I think that one thing we can be sure of is that we're going to go back, we're going to re-enter a very changed landscape, literally, and what things look like on the stage, and what we're going to have access to, and the kinds of experiences that we're going to have. And it makes me feel very excited that you're involved in that.
Yeah.
In designing those experiences for us, because you've always done beautiful work.
And thank you for letting me spread the word about virtual theater a bit too.
Yeah, no, I'm delighted to. I think we all are excited to be in live spaces again, but also I think both people that are working in the theater world and just audiences in general are realizing that there were benefits to be had, and the ways in which they can get integrated in that experience are pretty exciting.
And most importantly, they're not mutually exclusive from each other all the time. So they can blend together beautifully. So,
well, get out there and do it, Mark. And
absolutely.
Well, thank you so very, very much for being here.
Thank you, Tina.
And thanks to all of you for joining us here on Into the Absurd. We have a little bit of a programming note to share with you after, gosh, how many years? No, it's been a little over a year, but since March of 2020 was when we started just testing. Bob Schmidt and Erica Holscher and I and a number of wonderful theater artists here in Philadelphia and around the country got together and decided that we wanted to stay in touch with each other every week. And we were wanting to be creative and share creativity and stay connected. And with you as the audience, we wanted your questions and your input and just all of your great energy as we all, one step at a time, just worked our way through a very dark forest. And it's been a wonderful year. And this is a show that's going to stay here at the IRC Into the Absurd. But what we're going to be doing for the next month or so is taking a little hiatus. We'll be back during the Fringe Festival. We have some exciting guests lined up from here in Philadelphia theater that are going to be joining us during the 4 weeks of the Fringe. I don't have these dates right in front of me, but I believe the Fringe starts on September the 7th and it runs through that first week in October. So during this little hiatus, we have not missed a week yet, but we're going to take some time for a little thinking and vacation, and also to get our heads around where we're going to be when we come back out into live theater and what our season is going to look like. We've told you a couple of times that we're looking at Tennessee Williams' The Two Character Play. We are also looking at Enda Walsh's The New Electric Ballroom, and we're looking at a number of different small venues around the city. And so we thought we should be putting our head towards what that can look like and get prepared for that, hopefully in the early part of 2022. So we'll take a couple of weeks off here and we will see you back during the Fringe. And then the way that we'd love to use Into the Absurd in the future is perhaps not a weekly show, but a time for us to gather around the campfire, as Mark said, and to share what is happening with shows when we get back on stage, maybe to integrate some of these ideas in an opening night sort of in-theater virtual Zoom party that we could have. We will be thinking, with the help of Mark and other artists, the ways that we can integrate you into the work, because it's been such a rewarding experience for us. But we're going to just take that little bit of time to plan it out and to think about it. And if you're on the IRC's mailing list, which I'm sure most of you are, you'll get that email from us. They won't be weekly, but they will be when we have something new to announce. And you can expect to see us, say monthly, or when a show is happening and when we feel the time is right for us to join together. We talked a little bit about, with Mark, a show that playwright David Robson is working on. His wife, Sonia, who you know from 2 iterations of The Bald Soprano, where we were all on stage together. She and I are going to be working on a project, an adaptation of Strindberg's The Stronger, and we're hoping to bring that to you around the holidays. So we have some exciting plans in the works, and we just need a little bit of time in the room to think through all of that, and we think our time will be well spent, and it will give you all the vacation from us for just a little while. But from Bob Schmidt and Erica Holscher and everyone here at the IRC, I'm getting a little verklempt talking about it, but it's been a wonderful time to share with you, to get us through the pandemic. And we can't wait to see what Into the Absurd is going to look like in the future. And we hope that you'll be there in the audience with us when we come back. We'll see you during the Fringe. Look for emails from us or on our Facebook page or on our YouTube channel. We'll be letting you know what's happening. And we can't wait to be in conversation with you again. And just so many thanks for giving us the strength to make it through this very unusual time. And we're going to take that and we're going to put it to good use as we head out into the world on the live stages. And I can't wait to see you there. Take care.